Welcome to another episode of the Travis on Sports podcast. I'm Travis Tyler, here to talk about the latest sports news and headlines from the last week. Today is April 26th, 2022. We're talking the NFL draft, the latest around the Washington Commanders legal situation, another star NFL receiver wanting a trade. The NFL will be expanding its Christmas schedule this year. The latest from the NBA playoffs, including a couple injured stars and a fired coach, a surprise coaching retirement in college basketball, some more NBA draft declarations and more transfer portal activity, some other college headlines, and the latest on the NHL playoffs as we enter the home stretch with the playoffs starting next week. Well, we will start today with the 2022 NFL Draft, quickly approaching. Takes place in Vegas this weekend. Thursday night will be the first round. Friday night will be the second and the third round. And the fourth through seventh rounds will take place on Saturday morning through afternoon. You can watch the draft on ABC, ESPN, and the NFL Network. Basically, if you're not familiar with it, teams will take turns selecting college players to add to their rosters, trade picks, they'll trade players, all that stuff. And just basically, it's a tool for teams to improve their rosters. I'll have more of a breakdown on teams' draft hauls on next week's episode of the Football Savant podcast, which will recap what happened during the draft. There's also plenty of material on the draft on the footballsavant.com that will be posted throughout this week and throughout the weekend. But for now, I'm just going to go over a couple of the headlines. People seem pretty split on what the Jacksonville Jaguars will do with the first overall pick. Michigan defensive end Aiden Hutchinson was largely considered to be the favorite throughout most of this process, but after absolutely crushing the combine, Georgia's defensive end Trayvon Walker is rumored to have possibly surpassed him and is now the betting favorite in Vegas. There's a lot to unpack here with this pick, actually. Peter King, who's a notable sports reporter, former Sports Illustrated writer, said the other day that he's heard from reliable sources that the pick will be a surprise to most. I'm not sure you can totally put Walker in that category there, but a month ago he wasn't really projected to be in consideration there, and now, for me at least, he fits in the category of a surprise considering he was projected to be a late first round pick, possibly not even in the first round until the combine. Offensive line would also make sense for Jacksonville to invest in protecting their quarterback Trevor Lawrence, who they just drafted last year. But there are other guys who would make sense for Jacksonville, and they're guys that would fit the surprise description with Ike Ekwonu from North Carolina State. Evan Neal from Alabama was once thought to take that pick. Maybe they even reach for Kyle Hamilton in Notre Dame and make him the first ever safety drafted number 1 overall. Who knows? Rumors on Twitter yesterday claimed that Trent Baalke, the GM, wants Walker, owner Shed Khan wants Aiden Hutchinson, and coach Doug Peterson would prefer an offensive lineman. We'll just have to see what goes on there. Plenty of heat, plenty of activity around the first overall pick, and that's just the beginning of the draft. As far as I can remember, I haven't seen a class with this much uncertainty in terms of top prospects in draft order, and I even saw something earlier that said that a lot of teams only have total first round grades on 12 to 16 of the prospects, so that would mean that the latter half of the first round is not as good as most years supposedly. But with this much uncertainty surrounding everything, it could make for an extremely entertaining night, or we could be completely overreacting like we do a lot and things hold serve, and there's not really one expected projection. Projections are kind of all over the place this year, but I would say if Aiden Hutchinson went first overall and Kayvon Thibodeau went to Detroit, that would be about as calm as things could possibly be with the first 2 picks. You really don't know where Houston's going at number 3. They could go a number of ways there. That could be where the curveballs start coming in. In terms of strength in this class, I would say the defensive front 7 and wide receiver are a couple of the strengths. There are 5 or 6 receivers that will go in the first round, and possibly another 2 or 3 that could sneak into the back end if teams really want a receiver at the back end of the first round. Plus, there are even more guys at the receiver position who could become contributors as later round picks. Like third round, you could have Jalen Tolbert from South Alabama. Fourth or fifth round, maybe even sixth round, Tennessee's Velus Jones. Fourth or fifth round, I would say, Clemson's Justin Ross, who was a first-round guy before an injury caused him to miss all of the 2020 season because of spinal surgery. Kentucky's Wan'Dale Robinson is a slot guy who could help a lot of teams on day 3, maybe even later in day 2. He's a third, fourth, or fifth round pick, depending on who you ask. Defensively, there are 4 defensive ends that should be top 10 picks. We've talked about Hutchinson, we've talked about Walker, we've talked about Kayvon Thibodeau, and the 4th would be Florida State's Jermaine Johnson. You also have Purdue's George Karlaftis, who should be taken in the first round as well. And there are still some good players that could help out later along the defensive line. Zachary Carter from Florida is listed as a defensive tackle, has more of the size of a defensive end, and can play pretty much anywhere on that defensive line, except he's probably not going to be a nose. He's not quite big enough at the nose. And Kentucky's Josh Paschal is a little bit of a bigger built guy that can fill the same role, play inside and outside as well. Carter could come off as high as the 2nd round. I would say Paschal is probably more of a 3rd or 4th round guy, but either way, both of them will be gone by the end of round 4, I think. Linebacker is a pretty deep position in this draft, especially on day 2. The only guys that are being talked about really as round 1 guys are Devin Lloyd of Utah and Nakobe Dean of Georgia. And Dean, if you believe some of the rumors out there, could be slipping out of the first round, or he could be pretty much a lock for the first round. Again, it depends who you ask. And his teammate Quay Walker, also Georgia linebacker, is creeping up towards the first round as well. You will also see another Georgia linebacker, Channing Tindall, drafted before the end of round 3 probably, and other guys to watch on day 2, where I would expect a run on linebackers a little bit, probably in the 3rd round more than the 2nd round. Cincinnati's Darian Beavers, Wyoming's Chad Muma, Wisconsin's Leo Chenal, Montana State's Troy Anderson, and Alabama's Christian Harris. And then if you're moving to day 3 guys in the 3rd, 4th, maybe in 5th round, Darian Butler is a very underrated guy out of Arizona State, probably would be appreciated more if he played for a higher profile program. Jack Sanborn of Wisconsin was projected to be a higher pick last year than he is this year. DeMarco Jackson from Appalachian State, I think, had a pretty good performance so far this offseason. And then Damone Clark, who played at the Senior Bowl, the LSU linebacker, probably would have been a day 2 guy, but they uncovered I believe it was a herniated disc in his back, and he had surgery to fix it, and it caused him to miss probably all of his rookie year. And that's going to keep him falling in the draft, but somebody is going to get a late round bargain with him if he can return to the form that he has been at most of his career. Unlike most classes with the quarterbacks, there is not a consensus elite franchise game-changing quarterback in this class. You ask most people, they'll probably say Malik Willis from Liberty is the closest thing because he has a hell of an arm, an absolute cannon, and is one of the fastest and most elusive quarterbacks we've seen. But there's a lot of questions, I guess I would say, about the mental aspect of the game and whether he is for sure a franchise quarterback. He's certainly the guy that everyone thinks has the highest ceiling and the highest potential, but does that mean he's the first quarterback off the board? Who knows? Kenny Pickett from Pittsburgh is really the only other guy that most expect to come off the board at the quarterback position in the first round. So that would be just 2 quarterbacks in the first round. It's a possibility somebody like Desmond Ridder or Matt Corral or Sam Howell even sneaks into the back end of the first round. The Carolina Panthers have been the team most likely linked to drafting a quarterback. That guy would at least be competing with Sam Darnold for the starting job and likely become the franchise quarterback of the Carolina Panthers if he were drafted. Depends whose stuff you're reading, whether they like Willis or they like Pickett better. You can also see teams like the Pittsburgh Steelers, who have Mitch Trubisky as their quarterback, the Washington Commanders, who are trying Carson Wentz for now, the Seattle Seahawks, who the season started today, would be trotting out either Drew Lock or Geno Smith. That's an ugly situation. The Giants with Daniel Jones could use an upgrade there. New Orleans, between Jameis Winston and Andy Dalton right now, and they drafted Ian Book last year, they could certainly invest in a more prolific quarterback prospect. The Falcons, after trading Matt Ryan and bringing in Marcus Mariota, could find somebody to take over for Mariota after that 2-year bridge contract is up. Tampa Bay Buccaneers could bring somebody in to push Kyle Trask for when Tom Brady actually does completely retire. And the Indianapolis Colts, Matt Ryan's not getting any younger. They need a contingency plan or a succession plan in place there, and Chris Ballard is a smart GM that would probably be able to do that. Like I said, Willis is expected to have the highest ceiling. Kenny Pickett and Cincinnati's Desmond Ridder have been competing for the most NFL-ready quarterback. All three of those could hear their names in round one. Ole Miss's Matt Corral could sneak into round one. Nevada's Carson Strong is probably going to be third round at best for me. He's not as mobile as you would like, and he's from a smaller program, so those are the knocks against him. North Carolina's Sam Howell could sneak into the first round. At one point, he was expected to be the first overall pick, but he didn't have the season that teams expected out of him after losing some of the playmakers around him. Some day three guys to watch for: Jack Cohn from Notre Dame, E.J. Perry from Brown. Seems to be a rising guy, especially with his athletic profile. Brock Purdy of Iowa State was once projected to be top 3-round pick. Got some turnover issues that are holding him back, so maybe a team thinks that they could fix him up. And Skylar Thompson from Kansas State, he'd probably be looked at as a better prospect if he wasn't injured so much in his college career. The secondary in this class is pretty good, but it's top-heavy. I wouldn't really call it deep necessarily. There are some sleepers that could jump in there, and I would think corner is definitely deeper than safety. If you need a safety, you're probably taking one in the first 2 rounds, and this one corner could probably go at least 4 rounds deep. Kyle Hamilton, Notre Dame, is the top safety prospect. Right now, he's the only real firm projection to go in the first round. Wouldn't surprise me to see any of Penn State's Shaquan Brisker, Georgia's Lewis Cine, or Michigan's Daxton Hill also join him there. Baylor's J.T. Woods is a guy to watch on day 2, maybe even day 3, but I think he comes off the board in round 3. Jalen Petrie, his teammate, also around round 3, maybe even comes off in round 2. He's a guy that a lot of people think is going to come off the board earlier than most expect. Probably going to be more of a nickel-type safety in the NFL, but he's very good at that role already. And those two guys could carve out roles in the defense really quickly. I also like Maryland's Nick Cross and Cincinnati's Brian Cook as day 2 prospects. Corner, there's debate between Sauce Gardner of Cincinnati and Derek Stingley of LSU for the top spot. Gardner, you've seen what he can do on the field. He didn't give up a touchdown pass his entire college career, which is outstanding. And Stingley for LSU had the great year, the year they won the championship back in 19, didn't play in 20, injured most of the last year, so it's limited tape. There's no denying he's a good athlete and great coverage guy when he's on the field. At one point, he was by far the top corner in this class, and then Sauce caught up to him, and he started to fall a little bit. Now he's starting to rise again to the point where people are saying, I'd bet good money on Stingley going in the top 5 picks. I think the earliest you'd see one of those guys go, it would be to Houston at number 3. Jets or Giants could pull the trigger on those. The Seahawks could pull the trigger on one of those guys. So don't be surprised if Stingley's the first off the board. I still like Gardner a little better, but to me they are both top 10 players when they're both fully healthy. Other corners, look for Mississippi State, Martin Emerson. The other Cincinnati corner, Kobe Bryant. Washington has 2 corners in this draft. Trent McDuffie could possibly be in the first round, and Kyler Gordon. Clemson's Andrew Booth could go in the first round. Auburn's Roger McCreary. Florida's Kyer Elam. Those are guys to watch on the first 2 days. Then there are other guys who could go as early as the 2nd or 3rd round or as late as the 5th or 6th round. In Texas San Antonio's Tariq Woolen, who's a big 6'3", 205 corner that you just don't find guys that size with the tools that he has very often. Nebraska's Cam Taylor-Britt, who's been rising fast since a very good close to the season and a good performance in the All-Star games. Also small school guys, Joshua Williams from Fayetteville State and Zion McCollum from Sam Houston State are in the conversation to be sleepers in that day 2, day 3 range as well. Tight ends, there aren't really any first-rounders this year. Trey McBride, the tight end from Colorado State, is the only guy who could possibly work his way in there, depending on how teams have their board set and how the first round falls. He is the top tight end in this class. I would expect him to go in round 2. I don't think he's going to go in round 1 just because I don't think anybody has that big of a need for a tight end over some of the other positions that have more premium talent in the first round. Also on day 2, look for Ohio State's Jeremy Ruckert, UCLA's Greg Dulcich, Coastal Carolina's Isaiah Likely, who is possibly the best receiving tight end in this class, Washington's Cade Otton, Wisconsin's Jake Ferguson, day 3, Iowa State's Charlie Kohler, Maryland's Chigo Okonkwo, who is a shorter tight end. I say shorter, he's 6'2", that's short for tight end, but it's not really short for a person.